All right. Hey, Doug, it's so nice to have you on the Everything Saxophone podcast.
It's nice to be here.
Cool. The interesting story, I didn't share this with you yet. So, as we were deciding to move out here from New York because of the weather, our second trip out here, we caught a show at Spaghettini's. Oh, that's right, I did share this with you. We caught a show at Spaghettini's, and I think you had mentioned it was the Al Williams band. I wasn't aware of them, but you were the saxophone player. I was like, wow, this guy's really good. And then Najee walks out and he sits in for a little bit. And I was like, wow, this is really awesome. But one of the things I remember from back then, and even now, as I've heard you, through the years, and, you've worked with Greg Fishman and a whole bunch of other amazing people, your solos are so well crafted. They're just so well thought out, and I just, I wanted to say that just to start
Well,
off with.
thank you very much.
I'm going to dig into that a little bit, but so glad to have you on. I met you at NAMM, a couple of times or whatever, and we're definitely going to talk about your collection of saxophones and mouthpieces. But before I get there, can you tell everybody? I'm really curious because you were born in Chicago, but you were really raised in California. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, when you started music, when you started saxophone, and some like early influences?
Um, well, my mother was a piano teacher, so I took piano lessons. She taught kids mostly. So at that time, so around when I was around 5, I think I took piano lessons from her a little bit, and then in 3rd grade, I started playing clarinet in bands, or 4th grade. Third, fourth, I guess 4th grade. Um, and I wasn't very any good or very serious. And then I just remember, like in high school, like, well, what do you think about, thinking about what to do for a job? You start thinking about what you're going to do, where you're going to go to college. And I realized that I absolutely abhorred the idea of having to work. And my dad hated his job. Every adult I knew hated their job. Work was like this awful thing.
Wow.
And I just said, well, man, the only guy I knew that really seemed like they liked their job was my saxophone teacher. So I said, well, I could do that. It's, how hard can it be? And then I just decided, and then when I got serious, I just started practicing, thinking, well, God, I better get good, or won't be able to make a living. And then I started practicing a lot. And then I remember reading the book Chasing, and I had one record, Coltrane's Alternate Takes on Atlantic. And I remember listening to that record a lot, and I kind of stopped listening to, Led Zeppelin, and started listening to jazz. And I guess I was about 16, and I practiced a lot. And I remember, like, when I was after I graduated high school, I stopped going to high school. I had enough credits to graduate after my junior year.
Oh, wow.
So then my senior year, I just went to local community colleges and played in a lot of big bands. Um,
Wow.
and I practiced a lot. I mean, I remember practicing 1 month, 16 hours a day for 30 days straight.
Whoa, what?
Well, I remember just reading the book. I started practicing 8 hours a day, like all the time, and then I just kind of upped that up to like 10 and 12, and then I did 30 days of just like literally just playing and not doing anything else. And I technique, just playing simple stuff like scales, and I got really good pretty fast. I mean, like, in terms of being able to technically play. I mean, I remember just playing like through whole books of like etudes, and played through the Oliver Nelson pattern book, like cover to cover every day. And it started out taking like 3.5 hours. And after I did it for, a few months, it was like 45 minutes, just, zip through it. And, so I got really serious, and I went to Berkeley, kind of a semester late, so like starting in January of '79. And I was there with a lot of saxophone players who were famous today. Greg Osby and Donald Harrison and
Wow.
Rick Margitza was there. I think Scott Robinson, Branford, Marcellus. It's a lot of good sax players.
The glory days, yeah, definitely. I'm glad that you dug into. I was going to ask you, so what kinds of things did you work on during those like 16-hour days? But I'm just curious, though. Did you have any instruction in terms of like embouchure and tone and stuff like that, or?
No, I knew about long tones, so I practiced long tones.
Wow. Okay. And you never got. I mean, you had to build up your endurance. I'm assuming you can't just. Some people. A lot of people that contact me always say, "Oh, I read about Charlie Parker practicing, so many hours a day. I'm gonna do the same thing." But you can't just up and do that. I think you built it over time, I would assume.
Well, I used to wake up at 8 and practice 8 to 12, and it's somehow it's like if it's noon and you've already practiced 4 hours, it's like and then after that I would just put Aebersolds on and improvise, and I spent a lot of time just improvising. And I mean, I know like Greg Fishman transcribes a lot of solos and figured out, I just listened and then improvised a lot mostly. I mean, I transcribed a little bit and I also read other people's transcriptions. It seems like a lot of people today spend all this time transcribing, and with the technology of being able to slow notes down and figuring out that computers will figure out your rhythms. It's kind of like there's some players that have a very online presence, where they transcribe a lot, and yet you hear them play and they obviously can't really play those solos. So I think it's more important to be able to play a solo that you transcribe rather than transcribe it. And somehow if you play along with something and you're playing along with the transcription and you play it enough to where you know it. And I mean, when it really does a lot of good, to get it to the point that it's doing the most good, you're not reading it anyway. You've really memorized it and you've just played it so many times that, but if you play a solo 200 times and then you can, I used to practice with headphones on. So I'm listening to, Stan Getz or something, and then playing and transcribing, and you kind of get to where know that how that guy thinks, and you're copying every little like inflection and like Coltrane on Atlantic, being able to play the glisses and the falls at the end of the notes, and how just how flawless really his technique was, and that's really because how much he practiced.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So you definitely have a different approach than a lot of people. I know I've interviewed Greg Fishman a number of times, and he definitely talked about his transcription process. And I know a lot of the folks out there that are doing their transcriptions, they're posting them up, and they're very detailed, they're very intricate. And I always say to people, like when you look at those, first of all, it takes a lot of work to do that. Number one, to be able to transcribe it, but number two, to actually put it out on something like a Finale or Sibelius, it definitely takes a lot of work. But the thing is that you look at those things and they're blinding, in terms of like all the embellishments and this and that, and you could never capture what's really right on the recording unless you use your ears, to figure it out first.
Well, yeah. Well, listen to something, and I would play through I have a bunch of Hank Mobley solos, and they're not really difficult. And I would play along with them, and then I would listen a lot to them, and then I would play along with the recording. And I also did quite a bit of transcribing, but not to the extent of I see now, like some people online and on Facebook that have like lots and lots of transcriptions, and they're not as for all that work. I would you'd expect them to play better. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but
Yeah,
I just,
I think what you're saying is that they're, those people, they're doing a service to people by writing out these transcriptions and stuff. But it sounds like your approach was when you were practicing, you were listening and you were transcribing, figuring it out by ear, looking at maybe a written transcription, to check or whatever. But
well, I did both.
okay, yes, you were doing a lot of playing.
Yeah, I played like for, long, a lot of hours and practiced a lot.
What's really interesting is that I'm going to make an assumption. You didn't have any private teachers then in high school.
I did. Well, I did. I had a private teacher started out, but when I really started practicing, I didn't. No. And then I took some lessons with Tom Kubis. And I took one lesson with a trumpet player, Ron Stout. And he was going to the community college I was going to. And so, I mean, I would take a lesson, but I didn't have any money since I wasn't working. So I couldn't really afford lessons at that time. So, I mean, I got a lot more out of just practicing.
Yeah,
I took one lesson with Tom Kubis and one lesson and then and then I went to Berkeley, and then I didn't really, they assigned you a teacher, and then I ended up with Joe Viola, and he's a classical teacher, and I never did anything he said. So he realized I wasn't interested in playing classical saxophone. So he played chords and I would just play. And then, he was kind of like my psychiatrist. You'd go and you talk to stuff. I mean, he was a really good teacher, but I should have taken it more advantage and studied classical saxophone, but I never heard a classical saxophone player I liked. So, though, I mean, Branford's beautiful, and I know I'm friends with Harvey Patel, and he's a wonderful saxophonist. I mean, there's a lot of good saxophone players that don't improvise, but I was more into just improvising, I guess.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me though, because a lot of people don't have access to teachers, and so they're trying to find ways to get better on their instrument. And you have the black hole of YouTube and you have Facebook and all this kind of thing, but you just took kind of a simple route. You just kind of played music that you like, you found it, you listened to it. You did play through certain method books, right? The usual ones, I'm thinking, the Universal Method and stuff, or?
No, I didn't do that. I had some pattern books.
Got it. Yeah, Oliver Nelson.
I mean, I studied Closet on clarinet when I was little. So I mean, I just literally just started practicing, and then I had Joe Viola's chord studies and scale studies, and which is just basically just playing modes of every major scale. So I would play every mode of every scale up and down, and then and then up into the altissimo, and of course it was the 70s, or so I was trying to play everything. And I remember they just come up with the Charlie Parker Omnibook, so I played that. I mean, I read that through that book. I mean, I would read through the whole book every day.
Oh, wow.
And then I listened a lot more to Charlie Parker, and there's a lot of mistakes in that book. So eventually, I would like make little corrections. And like the new Train Omnibook has hundreds of. I mean, I got that when it came out. I was like, I found 2 mistakes in the first 2 pages it's like a mistake on almost every page. I've just known those solos. I in college I learned the Andrew White transcriptions, and so I would play along with the Andrew White solos, and they're actually pretty accurate, I think.
Wow, this is really.
So
cool.
I learned a lot of trained solos, more than anything.
Yeah, but what's interesting though, like when I hear you solo, it's you're your own person. So like all these people that all these people that you studied, you're your own person.
I'll tell you that I learned a rhythm changes solo, a Michael Brecker on a Mel Lewis and Friends record. Well, that was one of the first solos I learned. So, I mean, there's a couple of turnarounds that when I was really young, I mean, I just would play transcriptions exactly. Like I would go to a jam session and I would play 8 bars of trained solo on Oleo from the, I mean, because I didn't have enough of my own material that sounded good. So, I mean, I also knew about changes. I'm trying to just, play through the changes, but then I would play like, licks. And I mean, it wasn't I'm not really advising that, but that's just, what I did. And I remember eventually you play like trains, these licks and ideas and little pieces of them, and then you kind of integrate them, and eventually you do it so much that you kind of forget where they came from, and they kind of like end up being part of your vocabulary. So there's really, and then I would do different people too, like Joe, I would listen to Joe Henderson and then kind of try to play like Joe Henderson, but not even as much as his notes, but his stylistic things that he would do, and like kind of that sound and the way he would tongue, and and I really liked Hank Mobley's lines, and so I learned a lot of those, and they're a lot easier to play than Coltrane's. So
yeah. So what would you suggest for someone who may not have a teacher or who's just starting out? Who would be some artists that you think classic jazz artists that you think people should start to listen to?
My favorites are still the people that first inspired me to this day: Sonny Rollins, Joe Henderson, and John Coltrane. And then right after those three, I really, Charlie Parker. I mean, Charlie Parker really belongs in those, in the top tier too. But I mean, but those three for tenor players, because I was a tenor player first and foremost. But after that, I would have to say, I'll just stick with tenor players. But something about Paul Desmond, though, kind of became and Stan Getz. I liked, that approach. I had some Brubeck records like really early on. My parents did, and I remember listening to them and thinking that Paul Desmond's playing was just pretty much perfect. And that the idea of playing very melodically, it's for me, playing melodically is just really playing the changes, because changes are naturally very melodic, and somehow if you really just connect the notes and find the melodies without trying to play with too many chops. It's kind of like there's like opposite ways of playing, and I would kind of go to extremes. Like I would try to play as much stuff as I could in a measure, or everything, play with as much intensity, as much energy as I could, and then I would try to play perfectly, and just kind of construct the most melodic kind of solo I could.
Interesting. That's a good dichotomy. And, the people that you mentioned too, like, especially I think Paul Desmond, it's almost with that almost classical sound. But yeah, you listen to his solos and it feels like it was something that was written out, it was that perfect.
Yeah, they're beautiful. I also love, like Wayne Shorter, Hank Mobley, Gene Ammons. I mean, there's very few people that I really listen to a lot. And I don't know if this is like, I went to school with Branford, and I know he's playing very well, and he's very, very good. And Chris Potter, of course, is really, really well known now. But for me, I've never really listened to the players that are a lot younger than me. And Branford is my age, but Chris Potter, I think, is a few years younger than me. I just turned 60 Saturday, so.
Oh, okay. Happy belated birthday. Okay.
Okay, thanks. But so listening to Chris, of course, he's phenomenal, and I really like his playing, but I don't listen to him the same way that I listened to people when I was trying to formulate my, and I hear young players, and I hear their influences, like, because I've listened to like everything. I would listen to I've listened to every live tape that exists of Hank Mobley playing, and all of his records, every record he made. And even, well, I met him once. He wasn't doing very well at in like 1980. But I mean, even some of his later playing when he wasn't in his best. But you know, so I mean, I would just listen to everything I could get. You know, I had 13 Booker Ervin records on Prestige, and I would go out and buy them all. And now everything is available, and you can go out and get everything. But you know, so if somebody sounded a little different, I would want to, you know, and I hung out with Warren Marsh. I actually took a lesson with Warren, and he wouldn't take my money, and then he hired me on a gig, and I would, you know, I learned a lot of those Lenny Tristano lines, and we would just play counterpoint together, and to just start playing together, and playing contrapuntally. And I listened a lot to Warren and Lee Konitz, who we just lost to COVID, which is, which is pretty sad. But you know, this is, you know, different. He plays a little. They play a little differently, the Lenny Tristano people. So I really enjoyed the intensity that Warren Marsh could get, and yet while sounding nothing like Coltrane. It's funny, when I would play, I would try to play. I was kind of like, I would hear somebody kind of mimic them a little bit. In fact, like sometimes when I'm playing with Greg Fishman, it's like we listen back, we're trying to figure out who's who. We actually played kind of a lot alike on a few things on the record we did. I don't know if you've heard it.
Yeah. You know what? Now I see what you're saying. Yes.
But I was always kind of good. So when I was playing with Warren Marsh, I would play something like Sonny Rollins, or especially Coltrane, like. And it's funny, but I could do the harmonic thing of Coltrane and not do it like Coltrane, and he would like it, you know, because he would like to take it out, you know. But like I would like just play like, you know, go say like going to C major 7, you go to E major 7 first, go E major to G to so you're kind of playing that, or you know, it's the same, or like say go to C diminished and then C major 7, you know, just these kind of little like passing chords that kind of delaying your resolution. He would love it when I would do it, but if I did it like Coltrane, he would say, "You're not improvising. Oh, you're just not improvising." And so I would because I could play a little like Joe Henderson, Sonny Rollins, and Train, you know. But I would try to play just like Warren Marsh. I mean, I would like try to like I would just kind of like try to play as best I could like him, and then he would lie to me, he goes, "Now you're improvising." So anyway, it was but it was great to play with him, and I learned a lot playing with him. I took some lessons with Billy Pierce too in college, and of course I went to hear Jerry Bergonzi a lot, but I never took a lesson with him. But actually, it was seeing Jerry that made me want to stop sounding just. Before I heard Jerry, I wanted to sound just like Train. And then I remember hearing Jerry, and he played Some Other Blues, and he had the Andrew White transcription on the music stand. So he played the tune and the whole solo. And I was like, oh, you know, and I remember like, it was great. And Jerry Bergonzi is arguably the greatest living saxophonist. I mean, he's one of the greatest, and I really love him. But I remember he sounded so much like Train that I decided that, oh, well, I'll never be, you know, like.
Oh, I see.
So I started listening consciously and trying to change my playing to emulate parts of other players.
Interesting. This is really cool, and I'm glad that you're sharing all this with us, and it's giving, you know, I'm sure people a lot of ideas, and also people suggestions, you know, for who to listen to and whatnot. Let's dive, or let's keep going with this. So you go through Berklee, right? You graduate, and you know, what were your playing experiences after that? What happened after that?
Well, I there was a guy teaching at Berklee, Greg Bottolato. He got me, recommended me, and basically I got the gig playing with Buddy Rich, but as big band. but Buddy was going down to the Dominican Republic to do a gig, and then I was going to join the band. I wasn't, it wasn't like absolutely in stone, but it was looking like that was going to happen. And Buddy had a heart attack. The band disbanded momentarily, and I was literally like almost homeless in Boston. So I took a gig on a cruise ship. So I bought a ticket to Vancouver and went on an Alaskan cruise, and I did that for, I guess, 16 weeks. And I mean, I would practice a lot on the cruise ship, but after a while, you just start partying and like was hanging out on the cruise. So I started practicing less, and it's kind of frustrating because there wasn't too many serious musicians on the cruise ship. But I remember sitting in with everybody. I remember playing with the accordion player and learning Italian pop songs or whatever he did. But I played with everybody on the ship, and I would practice. And I remember like being on the crew deck like late at night practicing. I mean, and it was fine that I could practice on that cruise ship 24-hour days. And we had complete passenger status, so we would go to the singles party the first night, and I mean it was not like it is today where I think there have been issues. So people working on cruise ships now, they have to share a room. I had my own room. But the money was really horrible. I think I made $200 a week.
Oh.
Yeah. But anyway, and then I came back to Los Angeles, and I stayed with my dad, and then I started like going and sitting in, and I some of the first gigs I got, I met this guy Billy Mintz and Steve Hofstetter. Gordon Brisker heard me at a jam session and asked me to play on his record. I did a Gordon Brisker big band record. It's like a small big band, like 3 trumpets, 3 trombones.
Okay.
And I recorded a record for Gordon Brisker, and that was the first jazz record I ever played on. Before that, I think I played in one session. I did a Holly Near record. She was a folk singer, I guess.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so then after that, I started working a little bit with. I played in Jimmy Cleveland's band. I remember his wife wrote my first resume, and like, who have you played with? I said, well, I played with Herbie Hancock once. So she put that on there. But I never worked with Herbie. But I think somehow how things evolve, it's like still on there. I got a call to do a thing for where I played the saxophone for Lisa Simpson on The Simpsons, and that was the start of the second season. Well, it was I never worked for Alf Clausen. I just played some solo saxophone for Lisa before they even hired Alf. So I was actually the first person to actually play a real saxophone. And the director or whoever was there, I said, well, that looks like a baritone because of the curving. And he said, oh, no, it's a tenor. He goes, it's just a cartoon. So I played tenor for Lisa Simpson. But the funny thing is, I mentioned that to somebody, and so it goes on internet. There's a Wikipedia thing that I did the saxophone. And so I remember doing a record and a gig in right after, a few years later, but I remember doing some gig in China, and I was like appearing tonight at Lisa Simpson, and there was a big, huge billboard with Lisa Simpson, appearing at the jazz club. So I've taken that off that I ever did. It was like one little session, and I was subbing for somebody, but I never worked for Alf Clausen. So the main guy that plays baritone is Terry Harrington. But I never, so anyway, I took it off my website, and I'm trying to, and still people like ask me about that. I try to not mention it actually to anybody because it's kind of embarrassing. But I mean, anyway, I met Stanley Clarke around that time, and I started playing with him. And I still to this day play with Stanley off and on. I've worked on a lot of his records. I started working with Freddie Hubbard a little bit. Like he was mostly using Bob Shepherd at the time, but I remember in '88 I did 2 weeks with him, like straight. And after that, I did 2 weeks up at the Jazz Alley, and and I would work with him at Yoshi's and Catalina's. So I worked with Freddie probably about 50 times in his group.
Wow, I love the way he plays. That must have
been.
Well,
this was in '88, and I worked with him through about '91, and then he had a situation where he had a cyst removed, and they took out a lot of his muscles, so he was never able to play after that. And he would, of course, he needed the money, so he would go out and do gigs and not be Freddie Hubbard. But I mean, you have to judge Freddie from before he had his cyst removed.
Yeah. I know he also.
There's a couple records even that he did after that aren't. He doesn't play much on them, but he never really could play. Like he lost his lip.
Yeah, that's the worst thing for a trumpet player. And I know that he had taken some, lessons from Laurie Frink. Laurie Frink was like the trumpet doctor, and she would save everybody's embouchure and stuff like that. And what a great player, though. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, it was great. And then I worked with Horace Silver in '91. I did a record with him called Rockin' with Rachmaninoff. But I don't really solo on the record, but I got to work with him. And then I did his last tour, '96, and it was a big, long tour, and he never toured after that. So it was fine. I actually replaced, on Rockin' with Rachmaninoff, I replaced Ralph Bowen. He was with Horace before I was. And then I played with Horace. During the time that he had Michael Brecker playing on his records, I was in the band at that time.
Oh, cool.
So
that must have been an awesome experience too.
Yeah. I was talking about, transcribing. I remember transcribing a Brecker solos on rhythm changes. And when I was playing with Horace Silver, we did a couple double bill concerts in the summer of '76 with McCoy Tyner's group with Michael Brecker. So I was sitting there, and like every time I was about to play a lick, I would go, oh shit, was that from Michael Brecker solo? So it was really intimidating to be playing and having Michael Brecker sitting off stage. I talked to Bob Shepherd. He said one time he was at Yoshi's, and Freddie would always have you play a tune with the rhythm section, and then before he would, while he's just getting ready to come up on stage, and he calls invitation. And he counts it off. He turns around, and Joe Henderson's sitting right in front of him. And he said that kind of freaked him out too. Like all of a sudden, you're playing Invitation, which is like Joe Henderson's tune. And of course, we're all influenced by the way Joe Henderson played that tune. So, it's like there he is. Like you realize, oh, it's time to get your own shit.
This is awesome. This is so cool that this little history here, and there's so much, oh my gosh, so much more you could share. But what I was curious about? You were in Doc Severinsen's band.
Yeah.
For a bit. Talk about that.
Well, around '93, Ernie Watts, I had known Ernie, and I played with this guy, Brian Bromberg, early on, I guess, too. And Ernie was sometimes played with Brian too, and a few times we played together. So I mean, I had known Ernie, and he was nice enough to let me sit in with him when I was like 23 or 24. So Ernie recommended me for Doc Severinsen's band, actually subbing for him. Wow. And so I got a call, and this was probably around '93, and Doc was still on the Tonight Show, doing the Tonight Show, but this gig was not a gig on the Tonight Show. Okay. It was a gig going up into Seattle, I think, playing a jazz festival. So I did the gig, and then I subbed on the Tonight Show just once, I think. And I played on it with other artists, where they would bring a band, but I only played in Doc Severinsen's band once on the Tonight Show. But then when the Tonight Show ended, Doc would go out on the road, and Pete Chrisley wasn't interested in traveling with the band. He was like the only guy for some reason. But it was a great gig. Everybody that had done the Tonight Show was still alive, or mostly. I mean, Bill Perkins. When I started the band, Bill Perkins was on baritone, John Bambridge on alto, me and Ernie Watts were the tenor players.
Great band.
Yeah, Ernie Tack was on bass bone. The trumpets were Chuck Finley, Connie Condoli, and Snooky Young.
Oh yeah.
And later on, I mean, but I toured. Doc would do a little tour once or twice a year, and it would generally be 10 days. Like literally, we'd go out and do 10 one-nighters and take a bus in the Midwest. And so, we'd go from Chicago to New York or New York to Florida, and, playing at performing arts centers and concerts. And the band was good. I mean, Doc would rehearse the band. He was kind of an incessant practicer. So the band got really good, and we played, those charts that were, Bill Holman and Tommy Newsom charts, and John Bambridge wrote a great chart. I mean, it was a good big band, and he would do like, some of the swing stuff too. Like he had his arrangements on like King Porter's Stomp and I Can't Get Started, like a trumpet feature for Doc, and he would nail these like high notes that are incredible every night. And I would do this one tune that featured me, and everybody would drop out, and I would literally play solo. It was really fast. In fact, that's what got me the gig, because I could play fast at that time, probably faster than I can now. But
interesting.
Anyway, it was a fun gig, and I did it for. He used that band until about 2008. I think was the last thing. So I did it for 15 years, I guess, or 13 years. I guess, no, 15 years, from 93 to 2008. But it wasn't that much work. But he would do 1 or 2 tours a year. There was like one that I couldn't do, and then he got somebody else for, and then he called me again. And then after that, he kind of abruptly stopped using the Tonight Show guys. They started passing away, and I mean, we lost Connie Condoli, and he used somebody else, and we lost Snooky, and then when Ed Shaughnessy died, Doc didn't really. I think that was when he stopped using that particular band, and for a while he went out with the Airman and Note, and then I heard he had a young band of young players, mostly from New York, that he would tour with after that, and I think he still has a big band. But it's funny, but I have not played with Doc since 2008.
Yeah, wow.
It's been a while.
Yeah, but such extensive experience. It's really fascinating to hear all this stuff and hear all the stories and everything. And now, you know what I'd like to transition to. You recently came out with an album with Greg Fishman. How did you guys meet each other, form that relationship, and how did it transpire to come up with an album?
Well, I had his books, and I'd seen him on internet, and there's a lot of people that kind of teach on the internet, yourself included, and but he had a real strong presence of like teaching, and like his licks. He would play his licks, and there's when I heard Greg, I thought, wow, this guy can really play. I mean, so everybody, there's a lot of great teachers, but Greg's technique was, I don't mean to, was just like, I could tell like he was like a player more than a teacher, and and so I met him at NAMM show, and I was doing this gig at the Lighthouse it's a world famous jazz club place that, and I would do it I've done it like 15 years 10 years maybe in a row, where either the Saturday or the Sunday of NAMM in the afternoon from like 11 to 2, I have the gig there. So I would call it, the Saxophone Summit or whatever. I would just ask a bunch of saxophone players, and my friend, an organ player from New York, Brian Charette, would play, and a drummer. And so it's a two-piece rhythm section, because he's playing B3 and left hand. And then I would just call a bunch of sax players. One year, I remember I had Mel Martin, Greg Osby. I've had Azar Lawrence has done it, Vincent Herring, Roxy Koss. Oh, yeah. She's I think that's her last name. Yeah, yes. Roxy. Yeah, from New York. And her husband is a wonderful saxophone player, Lucas Pino.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's really. There's a lot of young players in New York. I would go to New York to do records for this label called Positone. So I've done a lot of records for them. I think I have about 15 albums out with them.
Wow, cool. So you ran these yearly shows at the Lighthouse, and then I guess one year Greg showed up or something?
Yeah, well, I asked him to do. I met him at NAMM. He showed up, and then we kind of had an affinity for playing, and then we became friends. And then he said, "Man, hey, I'm coming back to LA," and then so we did a quintet gig at the Lighthouse. I knew the girl that was booking it, and I could pretty much get a gig there anytime I wanted with a little bit of notice. So I would book a gig at the Lighthouse, and we played. And then he said, "Man, we should really make a record." I go, "Yeah, that would be great." So we just decided to do one, and he wrote half the tunes, I wrote half the tunes, and we just started. We went and recorded. One of my tunes didn't make the record because, I don't know. We didn't play it as well. It was too hard. It was kind of. I wrote a tune based on Giant Steps, changes over Sweet Georgia Brown. And we, of course, wanted to do it too fast. Well, it was fast, but it's hard to do a tune like that, and you have a pretty heavy competition trying to play a tune like Train, But anyway, so we did that record. It was really great playing, and we've always just kind of locked up playing wise. He's a great guy. And a great player. I just did another record for Positone with my friend Greg Osby and Bob Reynolds.
Oh, awesome! So
we did like two tenors and an alto with Brian Charette, and I did another one in New York, and they called it. It was one of their big. They had a little bit of success on that record, but it's called Triple Play, and it was for three tenors, and it was supposed to be. The three tenor players that were all on Positone: Ralph Bowen, myself, and
it'll come to you right when we're done.
Yeah.
Ralph Bowen, yourself, and
anyway, Ralph canceled. It was Joel Fromm and Walt Weiskopf is the guy I was thinking of. So the record's called Triple Play, and it's with me, Walt Weiskopf, and Joel Fromm. And we each wrote a couple of songs for the thing and did it. And I had a friend of mine, Randy Alcroft, arrange a few standards for three tenors. And so they wanted to do another one like that. So it was supposed to be... originally, the idea was that we'd do another triple play, but it's going to be with Bob Reynolds and the guy from Kneebody.
I'm not sure.
Oh, anyway, it was a young tenor player. Anyway, it ended up being, it was supposed to be myself, Bob Shepard, and Bob Reynolds, and then Bob Shepard canceled. So it's with Greg Osby with an alto and two tenors. Anyway, it should be coming out hopefully this year.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you, so where are these albums on your website?
Yes.
Okay, great.
My website is not really up to date, but it does list my records. My mother made my website for me, and it was like I told her I needed to get. So anyway, she had a friend of hers who was a web designer, and I mean this was the early days of website. Anyway, my mother wrote the things like like she designed it and did everything. She never had done. My mother's a very intelligent woman. She had never done anything like that. Anyway, when she passed, I haven't really wanted to change the website. So it's not like the most modern or, a lot of people have like these interactive, a lot more, like clicks to everything. And I mean, there's a few things on there.
Okay, as long as it gets the job done, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, it exists. I do have one, and people can reach me from the website if they want to.
And we're going to definitely, I'll be putting the links in the show notes as well. So, look out for those. But I'm going to now totally digress because we joked about this before we went on officially. So, like, I've seen a bunch of Facebook posts of you posting the gazillion mouthpieces you have.
Yeah,
you have more saxophones. I'm like, oh my God.
I have a lot of, I could show you the room where the saxophones are.
Yeah, you know what? You could walk and talk because you're on your iPad. So I just took a little trip with Doug, and we are in a room in his house. Now, for those of you that are listening to the podcast, you're going to want to check out the video for this because I can't believe how many cases of saxophones. Oh my God. There's got to be, 100? What? No.
Well, this is a big room. You can't see the room. They're like stacks and stacks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 100 or so, maybe more. I have about 100 tenors.
Okay, so that was insane. So my first question is, do you ever play any of them? Like, do you ever take some of them out, or some of them are just sitting there? I mean,
yes. No, I mean, I play them. I have things that I've just kind of collected, like saxophone things, but but I double on other woodwinds. So I started doing things. It all started with, like, I would do like some recording sessions, and I remember doing, the movie Gran Torino, with Clint Eastwood. There's a scene where there's like they had some like ethnic music that's supposed to be Vietnamese or the Hmong people. He had a source cue that was just a tape, and it was just a bunch of kind of wooden flutes and percussion. Well, so I actually made up all that music for that TV show. Wow. And that TV, and it was, and of course it went through the thing. And I remember I had 21 doubles on a session. Wow. So the track was so good, and that movie was such a hit that I made a lot of money for like the 3-hour session. I mean, more money. So I was like, oh my God, just because I had these ethnic woodwinds. So I went out and bought every other ethnic woodwind, like from everywhere. Like I bought a Nagasvar, like some Indian, some Chinese. I bow wow flutes. I would study and find the best makers of these instruments. And I bought dudukes and terregato, like Hungarian things. And I would play them a little bit enough to do it. And then I would get a few gigs. A few composers who would have me. I've done. I got a slide soprano, like a Rayful and Holstead slide soprano, and I played it on the movie Smurfs. And like I would get these calls, the composers started using me on things, and those a few of those movies that are that still pay the special secondary market special payment checks are I got into the studios doing things that I wouldn't have otherwise got. Marco Bertrami knew that I had this saxophone called the two-backs, and so I played that. Then I went out and I mean, I would make some good money doing some of these things, and I would go out and buy more horns and just more, different kinds of horns. And then it just became a little bit of an obsession, to get
just a little
like
bit,
every I mean, I if you look at the musicians' directories of instruments, like all the woodwinds listed, I have every single woodwind they've ever had in the book. And so I would just go, and some of them, I have these nays, and I can play a Turkish ney a little bit. They're kind of, it's like you blow across the top of it. And I can play the Egyptian nays, but they have these things with Iranian nays. And I bought a really nice set of them. But you put them between your two front teeth, and the people that play them actually file a space between your teeth. So of course I didn't do that. Well, I tried these instruments and I couldn't even get the sound on them. So I still have them. But so I can't say I play every woodwind, but I've tried to play pretty much almost every woodwind.
This is incredible. And, two things I get from this too. Number one, you made yourself, aside from your great playing, but you made yourself stand out by playing all these unique instruments. And two, this reminds me, a friend of mine, Alan Mandel, who was in New York, he had such a collection of instruments as well. Now I see nothing like what you have. And he certainly didn't have a two-backs.
He did.
Oh, he did? I didn't see it.
No. Oh, no, he didn't. Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. But he certainly didn't have a two-backs. But I'm just saying, my gosh, all those instruments there. And I think didn't you post a video? It was years ago of you playing. Was it contrabass saxophone?
Yeah, that was a sub. I maybe, but I got a full-size sub contrabass in B flat, which with a low A, which is the G below a piano. But even but the G below the Bosendorfer piano with the extension. So it's like the lowest woodwind made, except for it's the same note as a contrabassoon that have the extension have the it has the same note.
Wow, that's the air to be able to play that. Must be insane.
It's not as, I mean, it's like if you ever played a bass sax, it's not really that much different than a baritone or a tenor. And the Eppelshheim instruments are very easy to play, and they're made really, really beautifully. I mean, they're very easy to play. He's really a fantastic, incredible, artist in terms of making instruments.
Let me get into this. I wasn't planning on it, but what do you look for? Okay, so let's just take the basic instruments, like a tenor, because that's basically your main instrument. But whether it's tenor, alto, or bari, what are you looking for when you're trying out instruments and stuff? You've gone to NAMM. I'm sure you've tried out horns and stuff. What kinds of things are you looking for?
Well, the Chinese makers started with Jupiter, have essentially put everybody out of business. Yeah. I mean, you used to have, Cowworth, where they were made in Mannheim, Germany, and you had, these companies. Well, the amount of hours it takes to make a handmade instrument is considerable. And then these Chinese instruments come out, and they're like less than a tune-up. You can buy a new horn. Yeah. Less than a repairman would charge you to change a pad. I mean, you could get a tenor and then a lot of these companies would start basically buying Chinese horns and then putting their stamp on them, but they're not actually makers. Like P. Moriat, Cannonball, these Trevor James, these companies don't make the saxophones. They don't have a factory. I mean, Ishimori would take the best ones and then kind of redesign the necks. And they really tried to make the quality better and better. And they have gotten better every year. But they weren't, they weren't really usable as professional instruments for years. But now they've gotten better. And because of this, they were so cheap that most of the saxophone market is in students. You have people every year, bands, they need horns, they want to buy horns. When I was in high school, I saved up and bought a Mark VI. It was $710 for a new Mark VI in 1975. I remember that same year the Mark VII came out. I remember going, oh, shoot, I should have waited. I could have got a Mark VII. And it turns out the Mark VIIs were not near as good. So I guess I was lucky. So you just see these horns. They have gotten better, but they put all the other saxophone companies out of business.
Yeah.
If you're trying to sell a horn for $10,000 and they have and other people are, and your student horn is $5,000 and they're selling one for $200, and and then you had like Cannonball would buy a bunch of them and they would throw about a third of them away because they were really inconsistent. It's kind of like buying fake Rolex. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Cannonball would throw a lot of horns away and then, and market them as a professional instrument.
Yeah. Yes. Are you still, what's your main horn? Is it the Mark VI?
Yeah, I have an SBA I like to play sometimes, but mostly I play a Mark VI.
Got it. Yeah, because I was thinking, like someone like you going to NAMM, right? You have all these instruments and stuff. I could see you being curious to try everything out.
I've tried everything. They're really good. The best new horns, better than, I think, the new Selmers are, I think, better than that now are the two companies that really, to me, stand out were the Ishimori, which is, Woodstone, or the Ishimori. The Ishimori's has some great music stores in Japan, and they're really good. And also the Eastman have gotten better every year, and they opened their own factory. They actually have their own employees and their own factory in China, and they really put a lot of money. In fact, the people there, they actually bought a Mark VI tenor and alto from me to take over, or they wanted a really good one. And sometimes I buy and sell instruments, and they bought two Mark VIs from me, and then they were stolen, and then they bought two more from me.
Oh wow, okay.
So they've actually bought, and then they bought Haynes flutes. I have a Haynes alto flute, and they said, we were thinking about making a handmade alto flute, but we don't have one, and they don't have the tooling, so they borrowed my flute.
Wow.
And they're really good people, and they're really committed to doing a good job. There's a guy, Ken Beeson, too. He's with another company. And their horns were really great. I played a baritone at NAMM this year that I really liked. So, you've seen them get better and better every year. But I remember when they first started, like even 15, 20 years ago, the Taiwanese horns were just awful. They would play. I remember playing C to C, and the high C is like between a B flat and an A. It was just like not playable.
Yeah, they became lamps very quickly.
Not even good lamps.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my God. I remember also, just seeing these horns and even the trumpets too. And it's like, it would work for about a month and then the valves were gone. And there was no way that you could, get that instrument to work anymore.
Yeah, they start rusting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, mouthpieces then. You say you have a ton of mouthpieces. I saw the collection on Facebook. So what's your current setup and what do you look for? What's your ideal mouthpiece?
I played a Berg Larsen for 30 years.
Wow.
And then I just finally felt like I hit a wall and I wasn't getting any better. And then around 2008, a guy that had an incredible collection of saxophones and mouthpieces, he was upside down when the market crashed. And he had 13 houses. And he kept buying it. He would buy a house, rent it out, fix it up, get a loan, and then buy another house. But he was upside down with everything, and he had to file bankruptcy because when you're doing that, keep buying more and more property, and then all of a sudden the market, anyway, he was a good friend, and he had all these. He had some really. He was like a collector. He had some really good stuff. Well, I ended up. I still had an equity loan on my home, which my wife and I bought in '96. So. so I had still had that in place. So I actually took a loan out and bought all of his saxophones and mouthpieces. And then I started playing these New York links that he had. He had some that were worked on by Frank Wells, and Frank Wells used to work on Coltrane's piece.
How interesting.
And so I started like experimenting with links, and I realized that the ones that everybody likes, I didn't like the Florida, the early Florida links. I mean, I have a bunch of them, but they're a little bright, they're a little generic, and I thought that the Tone Master, which is the one right before that, or the double rings, the New York double rings, or the early Florida double rings, seemed like they were a little warmer to me. And if you do a lot of long tones and exercises and practice harmonics, you can get a lot of brightness. I mean, so you don't need a mouthpiece, with a baffle. And but I also was interested in playing. Theo Wani makes great mouthpieces for a certain type of playing, and I do a fair amount of studio work, so I would play different mouthpieces for people. They would get like, wow, I like that one, and do that. I worked on a lot for this Richard Perry producer, and I did 3 or 4 records for Rod Stewart when he was doing the Standards records.
Oh, okay.
And so I would work on solos, and I would play play differently on different things. And he would like, he liked this one out mouthpiece that Oleg made, that I had. So I mean, I would just like to play, and then I started feeling like, well, the more different things I played, the more the more versatile it made. And like playing like Paul Desmond on a Meyer is different than trying to play like Paul Desmond on an MC Gregory. So I mean, if you have, and so you've really played the equipment, and then realizing how to play on a master link is different than a tone master. So the master link is what Coleman Hawkins played, Chu Berry, all these guys played this, and then and it's different if you to play like Gene Ammons. It helps if you have a Brill Heart. Those plastic Brill Hearts. A lot of people played those. Bird played those, and so you get these vintage pieces, and they're different. And it seems like a lot of the new mouthpieces today, they're not really mouthpiece makers. They kind of like they've somewhat copied some of them, but the copies are never seem to be as good as the originals when you find a good one. But if you want a good, like, say you want to play like a Brill Heart, or which is what Gene Ammons played, you might have to buy 10 of them before you get one that plays great. And or they, a lot of old rubber mouthpieces need to be refaced because rubber warps after 75 years. And these mouthpieces are from the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
So that's a long time.
Yeah. So what do you predominantly? I know you said you kind of you've gone through a whole bunch of mouthpieces. But what's the first mouthpiece you pull out now? On
tenor I use a Tone Master. It's a New York Tone Master. It's about a 7-star. On alto right now, I use a Babbitt Meyer. I have a bunch of New York Meyers, but I like this one. And it was actually refaced. I bought it in about 1992, and it was refaced by a guy named Will Grizzle. And at the time, he was in Memphis. I don't know where he is now, but I believe he's still refacing mouthpieces. The Tone Master I have, I believe, was refaced by Brian Powell. I did a punk rock recording session for a band called the Dickies, and I played a mouthpiece that I have that was refaced by Adam Nywood, and it's a really bright Florida link, but it's like for playing like Lenny Pickett type. It'll just keep going. You can play normally I might go up to like a G, like an octave off, like only very, very rarely, but this thing will go like in a whole other octave besides that. Wow. So it'll sound like a dog whistle, like what Lenny Pickett can do. Sometimes he'll take a note and just fade it out by going all the way up. But if you have the right mouthpiece, it's not impossible to do that. And there's every different mouthpieces will give you different things. And so, from playing them, I would learn kind of would learn, learn about why different players sounded differently, by playing different mouthpieces. And I felt like it was a learning experience, and it was also, kind of an investment, and a little bit of a compulsive, obsessive issue too. Just you get, addicted to eBay, like whatever. Like I started, like buy horns, like, oh my God, these guys are selling. I went out and bought. I went out and bid on Mark VIs, and I would just buy any Mark VI in any condition, and I would put a bid of $4,000, and they were selling for $5 to $8, at that time, and I ended up with 10 Mark VIs.
Oh, wow.
And and then of course most of them needed to be overhauled, but it's just you could still get a Mark VI, and a Mark VI with a top overhaul is, in my opinion, still by far. And it's funny, you go talk to, you see all the best players, and all these people have all these ideas and all these opinions, and especially like on Facebook, and they're very strong. But if you go to the best players that I know, they're all playing. There's the picture of I record I did with Walt Weiskopf and Joel Fromm. Our horns were like all made the same year. They were like, and they're three, and they look identical. They're all, the same. They're all like probably 1959 or 1960 Mark VIs.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah, the year. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Greg too. Greg. I mean, so like all the best players use one. I mean, there's a few exceptions. There's people that don't like. Greg Osby doesn't like Mark VI. He plays, and he's real. He wants to sound different from everybody else. Different things, and he does. He's a great artist.
Yeah. So, all right. So now, okay, we've got the mouthpieces. We've got the horns. What about reeds? Do you change reeds often, or do you use the same brand?
I've tried a lot. I'm willing to try different things. I used to be a Rico artist, and somehow I was when Boozy and Hawks were there. I was an artist at that time, and they gave me a Cowworth tenor. And somehow when D'Addario took it over, I'm no longer a Rico artist. So at this point, I've been using tenor Roberto's.
Okay.
And they're really, really good, and I really like them.
Yeah, Tim Price switched over to Roberto's reeds too.
Yeah, they're really good reeds. I keep trying different things. Lately, I'm on baritone. I've been using the Rico Jazz Selects. They had issues for a while. I used to use Rico Jazz Selects, and then they had issues when they were inconsistent for a while. But I think they're much better now. I use Van Doren's on clarinet.
Got it. Blue box or just?
I use the
V21,
V16, V12, whatever they are.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, got it. I think V12. Yeah.
I think they're and I use 3.5 plus. So, and they work very well for me on clarinet. And I've tried a lot of different kinds of reeds. I keep trying them, and some reeds will do some things better. And I for a while I was using Woodstone reeds, which are the Ishimori, and that's Rigatti cane. Rigattis are good. Ricos, Vandorts. They're all great and they're all terrible at the same time. And and it can be really, really frustrating to try to find a good reed. At this point, finding a great reed is more important than practicing almost.
It takes up as much time.
Well, it's like, and if you're having a great read, it feels like you practiced.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
It's just so you deal with it.
Cool. All right. So now I'm going to again digress. And when we were talking the other day, you made me aware that you do have some online courses. And if you wanted to talk about that, it was mymusicmasterclass.com. You've got a 2-hour educational series I think is for advanced players because you get into some pretty advanced topics. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, um, it to be able to improvise and to be able to play over all kinds of music, it's very important for an improviser or a saxophonist, especially. Saxophone players are almost always, they expect us to be able to solo on something. To solo on something and really sound good all the way through it, you really need to understand the harmony, the harmony that's happening behind you. And I mean, there's some really good players that play by ear, but yet, nobody's ear is perfect. And it's somehow knowing what's going on will help you. I mean, there are really great players that play by ear. Chet Baker, I mean, there's nobody better than him. But so understand, just being able to improvise and be able to play the notes of the chords, and then get to the point that you can play changes, play over 2-5-1s, turnarounds. There's an Aebersold that you could just play by yourself, called the volume 16. It's just called 2-5s and turnarounds, and it's just, it covers things in every key. Also, the 2-5-1 volume 3. Those are just great methods to just practice to and really learn. And then you can learn and start learning about dominant seventh chord resolutions. And when a dominant chord is resolving, you can add tension by making it an altered chord or giving it a flat 9 or flatting the tensions. And as opposed to natural 9 and natural 13. Or you can have a natural 13 and a flat 9 and then work on your diminished patterns over that resolving seventh chord. It sounds complicated, but it's just, I mean, if you just get those Aebersolds and just start practicing and play those changes, and then after that, then to be able to like reharmonize the way when you hear a player like Michael Brecker specifically, or Coltrane, and you go, wow, why is he different than everybody else that's just like playing the changes? Like Sonny Stitt is great, but Sonny Stitt's playing the changes, the same changes as piano player. And if you hear Coltrane, he's doing these kind of, these things over the top of it, and these little like tensions, and then they tenses and releases. Well, that happens by superimposing harmony over the changes. So in my music masterclass, I talk about how to play modally by superimposing chord systems over that, like superimposing like giant steps over one chord, or it's kind of like what you hear Michael Brecker, Steve Grossman doing, those kind of players. And so it's just about like, say you're in D minor, it's just some like sequences that take it in and out by running changes, like to go out a little bit outside the key and then back in. And if you do it really quickly, and if you do it in a logical way, and it ends up with like, say you're in D minor, you go somewhere like C sharp 7 to F sharp major 7. And then from there go A7 to D minor. Well, you've gone really far out of the key and then right back. And so that relationship, the E of going from D to F sharp to B flat, that augmented triad is what Giant Steps is based on. So you could to go various different places and then come back. And in my music masterclass, I talk about how to do that.
Awesome. And I'm going to be putting the link in the show notes. It is mymusicmasterclass.com, but I'll put the link directly to Doug's. He's got 2 classes in there, or you could buy it as a bundle, and it's a 2-hour educational masterclass that looks really, really interesting. So let me ask you, now that we're filming this during COVID-19, we're both in California. In our state, we're still sheltered in place for a little bit. I know, you're a performer, and, we've all been taking a hit in terms of gigs. We'll still be taking a hit through the end of the year. In our state, at least, I know, large gatherings are still going to not happen. Larger concerts are not going to be happening. But how will you be dealing with this in the upcoming months in terms of performances and stuff like that?
I have no idea. I had quite a few gigs cancel. I normally play. I have a fusion band. I play with a great drummer from the band rock band Tool, and we play every the last Sunday usually of every month. We have for like 7 years at the Baked Potato, and it usually sells out. So I have no idea when they're opening, how they're going to open. It's a small little tiny club, so
yeah.
I mean, I don't know that they could even sustain like by selling every other seat. I don't even know, because it only holds like 80 people anyway. So I have no idea what's going to happen with that club.
And it's tight in there too. It's like the seats are like, it's just wooden seats. They're tables and everything's really tight in there. I've been there. Yeah.
So I don't really know what's going to happen. Hopefully this will be over with. They'll, in a perfect world, we'll have a cure and a vaccination for it next week.
Yeah, right.
So.
that would be awesome. I know it's definitely taking a toll, but you know what? I'll definitely encourage everybody, check out mymusicmasterclass.com. A lot of people are looking for ways to expand their playing and more advanced techniques. So definitely check out Doug's stuff. It'll definitely expand your horizons. Listen, Doug, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous, generous with your time and showing us that other room. That was really awesome.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you very much. You take care.
Thank you.